Hello and welcome to another episode of Head On. I'm Minaz Merchant, and again today we have with us Vatsala Mendonça de Souza, and also happy to welcome David de Lima, who is Masters in Political Science from the University of Mumbai, former St. Xavier's College student. So welcome David and Vatsala, and today we're going to talk about the whole concept of Hindu terrorism, whether it's fact, fiction, what it means, is it a word that divides and polarizes, is it an accurate word in terms of terminology.
Minaz, I have to begin with asking you a question on Raghuram Rajan's new book, The Third Pillar. He mentions there that majoritarian Hindus are a threat to liberal India. Are they?
No, they're not. Vatsala, the point is, Raghuram Rajan has said that in his book, but if majoritarian Hindus were a threat to liberal India, people like Narendra Modi would not get 31% votes. The BJP would get 80% of all votes. So clearly, Hindus by nature are not majoritarian in terms of in the definition of the word, the way it's used by most people, which means Hindu-centric, anti-secular, and using the word secular in the proper definition of the word, not the fraudulent version which is often used. So to say that majoritarian Hindus, as a group, are a threat to liberal India is complete rubbish. History has proved that they are not. And I think he's made that comment without really thinking it through. So to cut the whole thing short, I think that if the Hindu population of India, 80% of India is Hindu, if they were really anti-secular and majoritarian in their views, anti-minorities, then obviously India would be a very different kind of country. We're at the moment an extremely secular country because Hindus are by nature secular. And as many people have said, that India is a secular country in the truest sense of the word because of Hindus, not because of minorities. Minorities don't impose secularism on India. It's the Hindus' innate acceptance of all religions. You pray in your own way, you believe in your own God. There's no diktat, there's no book, there's no codification. So that sort of respect that Hindus give to other religions makes India not a majoritarian country. It's a Hindu majority country, but it's not a majoritarian country. And Raghuram Rajan and people like that should know the difference between majoritarianism and being majority.
He also uses this term populist nationalism. What does he mean by that?
No, this is a bit of a bugbear, frankly, with me, because the word nationalism is so badly defined, so badly abused, Vatsala, David, that people use a prefix to try and give it a label. They don't ever dare criticize nationalism without the prefix. You notice that. Even Raghuram Rajan will say, in this particular case, populist nationalism. Others will say ultra-nationalism. They'll say hyper-nationalism. They'll say Hindu nationalism. Or they'll say jingoistic nationalism. There's always a prefix. It's a bit of a way out. It's an escape clause. Oh, we were talking about populist nationalism. But you can't criticize nationalism if you define it accurately. And anyone, including Raghuram Rajan, knows that nationalism in the Indian context is not expansionary. It's plural, it's inclusive. And it's Gandhiji's definition of nationalism, where you protect your national security and your, the poverty that we have in our country, which is our main problem, that is addressed. Right. I think, David, we've got lots of viewers, their questions that we asked for on my handle on this whole concept of Hindu terrorism, nationalism, the definition of Raghuram Rajan said. Of course, these are all related issues, what Vatsala has mentioned. But would you like to read out some of the questions, many questions that we've got? I'm sorry, we can't take all of them. We'll try and take as many as we can right now. So, David, the first question that we've got from our viewers, please go ahead.
The first question is from viewer Reshma Nair, who would like to know, with reference to Hindu saffron terror, what is an apt objective term for Hindu goons committing acts of non-ideologically sanctioned violence that must be prosecuted as crimes but should not be labeled Hindu? And how, in other words, how should we distinguish a deviation from the norm?
I think a simple answer to that good question from Reshma Nair. You define it as an act, as a criminal act. When there's an act of murder, there are, in the IPC, the Criminal Procedure Code, there are clauses, sections under which you can be prosecuted. And that's exactly what should happen. If there is a terror group like Al-Qaeda or ISIS or the Hizbul Mujahideen or the Lashkar-e-Toiba or Jaish-e-Mohammed, that's a different thing altogether. That's a terror organization. Here, if you have individual cases of criminality, of murder, they happen, unfortunately, often in every country. In Chicago, in America, every weekend they have 20, 30, 40 murders. So you prosecute accordingly, but you can't define it by a label of Hindu terrorism, which is why I would not define the terrorism of all these other Islamist terror groups as Muslim terror or Islamic terror. I never use those two words, Muslim terror or Islamic terror. I call it Islamist terror, because that is, the jihadi terror, which happens to be Muslim, but we don't call it that. So we don't call this Hindu terror, we call it an act of crime, because you can't compare a tsunami of terrorism, which is what Islamist terrorism is, with a ripple of acts of murder, criminality or whatever, by groups who happen, not groups actually, by organizations, actually not even organizations, individuals who happen to be Hindu. They could be Christian, they could be anything else. But therefore that nomenclature of Hindu terror is completely wrong. Any other questions that you'd like to go into?
The second question is from Pancham Taneja,
Yeah.
who would like to know the genesis of this term Hindu terror, and are there any examples of this terror outfit causing any damages to others, or is it fictional for political gain?
Well, David, the genesis is really from 2004, when UPA 1 took office. That's when the whole thing started. 2002, the riots in Gujarat. Sonia Gandhi realized very quickly that Modi was polarizing communities, and in 2007 she made that comment, Maut ka Saudagar. But much before that, 2005, Ishrat Jahan, an LET, Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorist, was labeled by many people, including those in the Congress, as being an innocent college girl. But she wasn't. She was a terrorist, the LET, the Lashkar terrorist. And she was killed by the Gujarat police. From that moment onwards, there was a decisive, there was a decisive methodology by people in the Congress, on the left, and everywhere else, in many other sections, to label this sort of thing as saffron terror. By 2007, Shivraj Patil, P. Chidambaram, many others in 2008, 2009, Shivraj Patil, the Home Minister, they began to label it as saffron terror. In 2007, there were 3 cases: Ajmer Sharif bombings, Mecca Masjid, and the Samjhauta Express, where Hindu groups, including Swami Asimanand, etc., were accused. And in all 3 cases, of course, as we know, they've been acquitted. So the label of saffron terror went through this entire UPA 1, UPA 2 period. That's almost 10 years. There was a distinctive sort of, inclination of people to label it as such. And we saw the WikiLeaks cable, in which Rahul Gandhi himself said that right-wing terrorism in India is more of a threat to our country than, I don't know whether he used the word Islamist, which is the right word to use, or Islamic terror. And so he sort of equalized the two, which is completely wrong. He shouldn't have done that. So this whole 10-year period led to this sort of labeling, which is absolutely No, it's divisive and it's entirely incorrect. Any more questions?
Yes. Our third question
Yeah.
is from Aneep Sanjeeva, and they would like to know, is there an understanding between the Pakistani deep state and the Indian National Congress Party? And in addition, there is also another question from Aman Modi, who would like to know, is it true that the entire Hindu terror theory was a big international conspiracy in which even the ISI was involved?
David, I think it's a stretch to say that. I don't think that the Congress or any political party in India has any connection with the ISI, which is a terrible organization, a subversive organization, which subverts individuals who may belong to different parties in India. There might be journalists, there might be politicians, there might be activists, lawyers, ex-bureaucrats, ex-armed force officers, etc. So they are all not immune to largesse, not immune to subversion by the ISI and the Pakistani deep state. I don't call it the deep state, wrong word. It's a Pakistani state. There's no deep and narrow. It is Pakistan. And they subvert. And their idea is to try and indoctrinate as many Indians as possible. But a connection between a party and the ISI, a political party in India, and the ISI is obviously not correct. So that's not true. But subversion of individuals definitely has been ongoing for many decades. That's something we must try and tackle with our own human intelligence and covert capabilities, a bit of which we saw in the Balakot strikes, when we identified the rooms and the people who were in each of these U-shaped hostel, and we attacked them quite in a pinpointed way. So we've got to build up that covert capability to as an antidote to the sort of subversion that the ISI, as the questioner asked, as an antidote to the subversion that the ISI tries to engage in our country.
Vinas,
Yeah,
could I jump in with one question?
Yeah.
It's from Aditya Chowdhury.
Mm-hmm.
He asks, what was the motive behind the coining of this term, Hindu terror? And what are its implications on politics and national security?
Well, what's the basic intention was political. There's no question about that. The Congress, the left, and parties who are communal, frankly. They pretend to be secular, but they're not, because they appease minorities. They don't empower them. Samajwadi Party, the Rashtriya Janata Dal of Lalu Prasad Yadav, and so on. So all of them realized after 2000, when actually Modi and many people in the so-called right wing or the BJP became popular and were winning election after election in states, Gujarat, etc. They realized that there was a political movement happening, and that they needed to stamp down on it. And one of the reasons, one of the ways in which you can do it is exactly by what the questioner asked. That was entirely a political intent to try and label them as somehow undesirable, and therefore to hurt them politically.
Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you, David Vatsla, for joining us, and thank you for watching. We hope that you'll be with us again next week, or a bit earlier, because we've got a special segment coming up as well on Nyay, which is Rahul Gandhi's minimum income guarantee scheme. So that might be interesting. We'll be doing that shortly. But thank you for being with us, and thank you for watching, and goodbye for now.